Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. When someone is truly marked, destruction gets denied access, not out of kindness, but out of order. There's a kind of protection people don't talk about because it doesn't fit into motivational posters or soft spiritual language. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up with lightning and background music. It's the kind that quietly rearranges outcomes while everyone else is still busy plotting. And when people finally notice it, it's already too late for them to do anything about it. Here's a fact that messes with the ego. Throughout history, individuals who carried disproportionate influence weren't always the strongest, the richest, or the most feared. They were the most preserved. Wars broke out around them and somehow missed them. Scandals exploded near them and never stuck. Enemies fell apart trying to touch them, not because they were perfect, but because removing them would have disrupted too many timelines. That pattern didn't end in ancient history. It just got quieter. And that's where the regret comes in. See, the people who laughed at you, doubted you, minimized you, or tried to use you, thought they were dealing with a regular human with regular limits. They thought consequences worked on you the same way they work on everybody else. They thought time would humble you, pressure would break you, and isolation would erase you. Instead, time refined you, pressure filtered people out, and isolation upgraded your discernment. Now they're watching from a distance, confused, uncomfortable, and yes, deeply regretful. Because here's the part nobody warned them about. When someone is truly anointed, even chaos has boundaries. Plans misfire. Doors close before harm enters. People who meant damage suddenly change their tone, their strategy, or their direction altogether, sometimes without even knowing why. It's not that the devil likes you. It's that he knows better than to overplay his hand. You're not worth the exposure. And let's be honest, that realization hits them like finding out the person they underestimated just happens to have a direct line to the building owner. No argument, no appeal, just access revoked. The jokes stop being funny, the confidence disappears. The regret sets in quietly, usually at night, when distractions wear off and reality gets loud. So if you've ever wondered why certain attacks never landed, why certain disasters curved around you, why certain people who meant harm suddenly backed off or self-destructed, this isn't coincidence, and it's definitely not luck. This is about alignment, assignment, and the kind of protection that doesn't need applause to function. And by the end of this, the regret they're sitting in will make perfect sense. Number one, their regret isn't emotional, it's existential. What they feel isn't sadness, nostalgia, or even guilt. It's something heavier and harder to name. Emotional regret fades with time, distractions, and new people. Existential regret doesn't. It sits quietly in the background of their life and changes how they see themselves. It forces them to confront a truth they were never ready for. They misread something important, and that mistake reshaped their future. They don't just regret how they treated you. They regret the version of reality they operated from when they made those choices. At the time, they felt confident, certain, comfortable in their assumptions. They thought they understood you, your limits, your role, your value. Now, with distance and hindsight, they can see how shallow that understanding was. And that realization stings in a way apologies can't fix. What really haunts them is recognizing that you weren't just a person in their life. You were a moment, a window, a crossroad. When you left, something closed behind you. Opportunities dried up. Dynamics shifted. Things stopped flowing the way they used to. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily enough to make them wonder what changed. The answer is uncomfortable, so they avoid saying it out loud. They replay conversations differently now. Things they once dismissed suddenly sound wiser. Warnings they brushed off now feel obvious. They realize you were operating from a level of awareness they didn't have access to yet. That gap wasn't about intelligence or effort. It was about alignment. And alignment can't be faked or forced. This regret isn't about missing you personally. It's about missing who they could have become by staying in proximity to you. Being around you required growth, accountability, and honesty. Walking away felt easier in the moment. Now they live with the quiet cost of that decision. That's why their regret feels endless. There's no closure for it. You didn't just leave their life. You left them face to face with the limits of who they chose to be. Number 2, you walked away with the one thing they can never steal. When people look at you now, they only see the surface, your calm, your success, the way you move through life without breaking under pressure. What they don't see, and what terrifies them most, is the thing they could never touch: your alignment. Alignment isn't about luck, timing, or even talent. It's about being in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time, while staying true to your core purpose. It's invisible, unstealable, and completely non-negotiable. That's why everything they tried to take from you, respect, energy, trust, opportunities, failed. Because what truly matters about you isn't something that exists outside of you. It lives in your connection to your path, and no one can trespass there. They spent so much time trying to destabilize you, thinking that if they could shake your surroundings, they could shake your essence. But essence doesn't respond to threats, schemes, or manipulation. They attempted to corner you with fear, pressure, and intimidation, but all of it bounced off the shield they didn't even know you carried. Their attacks became proof of your invincibility, proof that the energy they wasted on negativity could never reach the part of you that truly matters. The most brutal part for them is that this wasn't about effort. You didn't have to fight back, prove yourself, or play games. Your alignment did the work quietly, steadily, and relentlessly. While they flailed, complained, and tried to rewrite your story, you moved forward because you were in rhythm with something bigger than their drama. They could never recreate it. They could never buy it. They could never borrow it. They could only watch as life unfolded in your favor, while they remained stuck in the consequences of their own misjudgment. This is why they regret underestimating you. They didn't just lose control over a situation. They lost access to the part of you that guarantees protection, clarity, and inevitable victory. That part of you exists beyond influence or interference, and no apology, manipulation, or attempt to regain proximity can ever reclaim it. You walked away with the one thing they can never take, the core of your destiny. Number 3, the devil doesn't attack what already belongs to him. This is the truth that most people fail to grasp. Protection isn't always loud, flashy, or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, and completely untraceable. But it's deadly effective. You weren't attacked the way others were because there's a boundary around you that even forces of chaos recognize. You were never meant to be collateral in someone else's plan. That's why the attacks that should have landed never did. Doors that should have slammed shut stayed open. Opportunities that should have vanished remained intact. Threats that should have escalated simply fizzled out. It isn't coincidence. It isn't luck. It's divine order, and even the darkest forces are forced to acknowledge it. What terrifies the people who tried to break you isn't your strength, your intelligence, or your resilience. It's that your protection exists outside their understanding. They see chaos destroying everyone else, and yet you remain untouched in ways that defy explanation. And that is where regret hits hardest. They assumed your life could be manipulated, controlled, or harmed the same way as everyone else's. They assumed the rules that applied to them would apply to you, but they were wrong. You were protected because the stakes were bigger than they realized. You weren't just a person in a room. You were a pivot, a key, a force whose survival mattered far beyond immediate circumstances. Their schemes, their plotting, and their manipulations couldn't account for that. Even their anger couldn't reach you because you were aligned with forces they couldn't see. That invisible shield isn't some metaphor, it's reality, and it quietly proves over and over that some lives are untouchable by human interference. And the cruelest part for them is that it's permanent. They can watch, fume, and calculate, but their misjudgment ensures they will never fully access or influence your path. They are reminded daily that they were wrong, that they underestimated you, and that their attempts to harm you were never more than noise. And as they sit in that regret, they can do nothing because you've been untouchable all along. Number 4. They tried to break you, but accidentally revealed you. Everything they did to tear you down ended up putting a spotlight on what they were trying to hide. They talked, pointed, whispered, exaggerated, and framed you in ways that were meant to shrink you. But pressure doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it clarifies. And the more they pushed, the clearer you became. Not louder, clearer. People started noticing that you weren't reacting the way someone guilty, weak, or small would react. You stayed intact. That confused them. They thought exposing your struggles would embarrass you. Instead, it exposed your depth. They thought highlighting your differences would isolate you. Instead, it identified you. The very things they mocked, your restraint, your mindset, your refusal to move like everyone else, became signals to people who were already looking for something real. Without meaning to, they gave others a reason to study you instead of dismiss you. What really backfired was their urgency. When someone is truly insignificant, no effort is required to erase them. You don't campaign against someone who doesn't matter. The energy they spent trying to break your image raised quiet questions in the minds of observers. Why so much focus? Why so much emotion? Why so much fear wrapped in arrogance? Their obsession told the truth before you ever needed to. They assumed exposure equals weakness. But exposure only weakens what's built on lies. You were built on truth, even when that truth was uncomfortable. So when they dragged things into the open, nothing collapsed. You didn't scramble to explain yourself. You didn't panic. You didn't contradict your own story. That consistency revealed something powerful. You weren't performing. You were grounded. Now they're left watching people slowly realize what they failed to see early on. That your resilience wasn't accidental. That your calm wasn't fake. That your growth wasn't borrowed. They see the respect you earned without campaigning for it. They see doors opening that they tried to lock, and the regret hits differently now, because they understand they helped build what they wanted destroyed. They tried to break you quietly. Instead, they introduced you loudly. Number 5, they underestimated how much protection comes from purpose. Purpose is a shield people rarely understand. They assumed your life could be derailed like everyone else's, that threats, betrayal, and chaos would touch you the same way they touch ordinary people. But purpose operates differently. It doesn't bend. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't wait for permission to assert itself. You weren't guarded because you were lucky, or because someone else was watching over you. You were guarded because your assignment demanded it. And that's the part that terrifies people in regret. Realizing that your existence carries weight they will never carry themselves. They attacked with strategy, gossip, and manipulation, thinking that effort would produce results. What they didn't account for is that when someone is aligned with purpose, the universe, circumstances, and even forces that seem chaotic rearrange themselves in ways that prevent harm. Doors close quietly before danger arrives. People with ill intent stumble and self-destruct. Opportunities align that weren't visible before. All of it isn't coincidence. It's the natural consequence of being in step with something larger than oneself. What they underestimated most was that purpose is untouchable. No attack, insult, or sabotage can dismantle it because it exists beyond ego and circumstance. It doesn't rely on approval, luck, or external validation. That's why everything they threw at you either bounced back or simply didn't land. They tried to shake your foundation, but your foundation wasn't made of convenience, fear, or compromise. It was built to withstand the storms that would have broken anyone else. Now, the regret they carry isn't just about losing control over you. It's about realizing that they will never fully grasp the force you are. They are reminded daily that their attempts were meaningless because your protection was never conditional. It was baked into your purpose. And that truth hits harder than any punishment because they see the gap between their attempts and your inevitable progression, and they understand, too late, that purpose cannot be stolen, undermined, or imitated. Number 6, their regret comes from realizing you were the safest person in the room. They didn't just misjudge you, they miscalculated the kind of energy you carry. Most people operate under the illusion that danger comes from the loud, aggressive, or visible threat. They assume control belongs to those who dominate the room, command attention, or strike first. They didn't see that real power is quiet, steady, and consistent. They didn't realize that being safe doesn't mean being weak. You were safe, not because you avoided conflict, but because your presence set boundaries they couldn't cross. That's the part that eats at them every time they think about you. You weren't dangerous in a way they expected. You didn't manipulate, scheme, or force anyone to recognize your worth. You simply existed with clarity, integrity, and discipline, and that existence was disruptive without needing theatrics. People who thrived on chaos and control assumed they could test you, push you, or break you. Every failed attempt to harm or intimidate you became evidence that they had underestimated the invisible strength that made you untouchable. You were safe, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you who needed stability, guidance, or influence without the drama they brought. The cruel irony is that they can see it now. Their failed attempts to destabilize you revealed a truth they can't take back. They were dealing with someone untouchable in the ways that matter most. You weren't just surviving. You were holding space in a way that forced them to confront their own weakness, miscalculations, and moral shortcuts. Every interaction they had with you that was meant to intimidate or belittle only highlighted their insufficiency. That realization burns because it isn't fixable. They can't go back and undo the way you moved through life with steady control, calm judgment, and unseen authority. They see that the very thing they wanted to exploit, your presence, was the thing that made them powerless. And now, while they stew in their regret, life continues to prove that the safest person in the room isn't always the quietest, but always the one who refuses to compromise their integrity. You were that person, and they know it. Number 7, you triggered their downfall without lifting a finger. The most shocking thing for them isn't that you fought back or schemed against them. It's that you didn't have to. Your very existence, your steady progression, and the calm consistency with which you moved through life exposed everything they were hiding. They spent so much energy trying to manipulate, control, or undermine you, and yet all you did was continue being yourself. That alone was enough to unravel the image they carefully built around themselves. Their downfall wasn't your doing in the traditional sense. It was the natural consequence of them underestimating you. Every lie, every exaggeration, every petty action they took to assert dominance only became evidence of their flaws when placed against your unwavering presence. They wanted chaos, but your stability highlighted their instability. They wanted influence, but your quiet growth revealed how little control they ever really had. They thought you were a participant in their drama, someone to be bent, shaken, or scared into submission. But by simply existing on your own terms, you became the benchmark they couldn't reach, the mirror they refused to look into, and the force they couldn't contain. What makes this more devastating for them is that your actions weren't even visible to most people. You weren't performing, you weren't boasting, you weren't seeking recognition. And yet, the consequences of your presence, your alignment, your resilience, your clarity were undeniable. Others could see the truth, even when they tried to cover it up. And every step they took to harm or diminish you only drew more attention to their weaknesses, their envy, and their poor judgment. They are left in disbelief because they expected you to struggle, to falter, or to become a reflection of their own chaos. Instead, your natural path exposed them, destabilized them, and revealed them to anyone paying attention, and they can do nothing about it. You didn't lift a finger, but the world shifted anyway. You didn't have to fight. Your presence was enough, and now they're left to face the crushing weight of the reality they helped create, a downfall they never saw coming, triggered by someone they never understood. Number 8, even their apologies would be selfish now. By the time they realize the full weight of what they did, any attempt at reconciliation isn't about you, it's about them. Apologies are meant to restore, to acknowledge wrongdoing, to heal. But theirs would be hollow, because the regret they carry isn't about your loss. It's about the loss they face in themselves. They miss what they could have had, the advantage of proximity to your presence, and the sense of control they once thought was theirs. They don't miss you. They miss the version of life where they were allowed to manipulate, belittle, or dominate without consequences. And that selfishness makes every apology useless. The cruelty of this reality is that they can see the truth, but they can't touch it. Even if they spoke words meant to mend, the foundation of their actions, the choices, the disregard, the misjudgment, is permanent. You didn't just survive what they did. You moved forward in ways that their words can't reverse. Their regret isn't about guilt so much as envy and helplessness. They envy the clarity, stability, and alignment that you carry naturally, and they feel powerless to regain any influence over it. Even their explanations would fail. They might try to justify themselves, blame circumstances, or present excuses dressed as insight. But the timing has shifted. The opportunity to affect your trajectory has passed, and that truth cuts deeper than anything they could say. Their regret is compounded by the realization that every moment they spent trying to diminish you now only illuminates their failure. Their words, no matter how polished, can't erase the history of their actions, the missed opportunities, or the protection that always surrounded you. You've moved beyond needing validation from them. Your life, your presence, and your purpose exist independently of their recognition. That independence is what seals their regret. Any attempt at reconciliation would be an exercise in self-soothing, a hollow ritual meant to ease their conscience without changing reality. They can apologize all they want, but the truth is undeniable. Their selfishness can never bridge the gap between what they lost and what you became. And that is the sting they will carry for the rest of their lives. Number 9, they thought you were ordinary because you didn't advertise your depth. They made the mistake of assuming that the quiet ones, the ones who don't constantly perform for attention, are simple, predictable, or weak. They measured your presence with their own standards: loudness, visibility, aggression, and overt control, and concluded that you were just another person to manipulate or dismiss. That was their first big mistake. They couldn't see the truth. Your power was never about display. Your depth wasn't something you shouted from rooftops. It existed quietly, firmly, and untouchably, operating on a level they weren't equipped to recognize. They were obsessed with appearances, believing that influence equals volume and that strength equals spectacle. While they wasted energy trying to provoke reactions, test boundaries, and measure your limits, you stayed consistent, measured, and aligned. Every subtle move you made, every small decision, and every calm response was a signal of something far greater than what they could comprehend. They assumed they were navigating a surface-level life, but beneath it, your foundation was anchored in clarity, purpose, and foresight, traits that can't be faked, borrowed, or stolen. The cruelty for them is that while they were busy projecting power, they were revealing their own weakness. Their focus on outward impression blinded them to the real strength standing quietly in front of them. They underestimated how much can exist beneath stillness, how much influence can grow unseen, and how much respect is commanded by integrity and discernment alone. Every attempt to control or diminish you ended up highlighting their lack of insight, patience, and wisdom. Now, the regret they carry isn't just about missed opportunities. It's about realizing that the person they dismissed as ordinary was actually exceptional in ways they'll never fully understand. They can see the results, the respect, and the alignment that you naturally command, but they can't replicate it, influence it, or undo it. Their misjudgment has permanently exposed the gap between them and you, and that gap is a constant reminder that true power is often quiet, unseen, and impossible to measure by the standards of the unprepared. Number 10. You were protected because your fall would have disrupted too many destinies. Protection isn't random, and it isn't reserved for the loud, flashy, or seemingly untouchable. Some people are preserved because the world can't afford for them to fail, even if the people around them never realize it. You were one of those people. Every move you made, every decision, and every step of your growth wasn't just about your life. It affected the trajectory of countless others. That invisible network of influence made you untouchable in ways your enemies could never predict. When they tried to harm you, the world quietly shifted, closed doors behind you, or redirected threats before they could land. They couldn't see it, and that's why their regret is so sharp. They understand too late that removing you wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible. They assumed the stakes were small because their perspective was narrow. They measured power by immediate control, influence by personal gain, and success by short-term impact. They didn't see the ripple effect that followed your existence. Every act of kindness you didn't advertise, every boundary you maintained, every quiet decision guided others in ways they couldn't trace. You weren't living in isolation. You were operating in a network of outcomes that required your integrity to remain intact. To disrupt you would have been to disrupt that delicate balance. That's why attempts to break you failed. That's why chaos around you found limits it didn't find elsewhere. The regret they carry isn't about you personally. It's about the realization that they underestimated the consequences of their actions, and that their attempts to control or harm were irrelevant. They acted as if your life was ordinary, as if your presence was interchangeable. But nothing you did was ever ordinary. The world depended on your alignment, your choices, and your resilience. And now they can only sit back and watch, powerless, as life continues to bend in your favor, while they face the haunting truth that the fall they tried to engineer would have changed everything, for everyone, and that possibility will never exist again. You were protected because the stakes were too high. That truth is their daily regret. Number 11. Their regret deepened when they realized replacement wasn't possible. One of the most painful truths for them is understanding that what you carried wasn't interchangeable. They assumed that time, distance, or effort could allow someone else to step into your place, to mimic your influence, your presence, or the stability you provided. They were wrong. You weren't a role to be filled. You were a force, a combination of purpose, alignment, and character that can't be duplicated. No one else could match your consistency, your insight, or the natural authority you commanded without effort, and that effort alone could never replicate authenticity. That realization gnaws at them relentlessly. They tried to find substitutes, people they thought could do what you did, manage the same situations, or even take over the dynamics they once controlled with you. Every attempt failed. Every replacement fell short. It wasn't because the new people weren't capable, but because the energy you carried, the timing of your decisions, and the clarity of your presence couldn't be copied. The gap you created by simply being yourself is irreplaceable. And that's the part they can't fix. The cruelest layer of this regret is watching from the sidelines as you continue to thrive in ways that make their substitutes look incomplete. The people they bring in can try, they can imitate, they can manage surface-level results, but they can't embody the gravity, protection, or influence you naturally exude. They realized too late that losing you wasn't a small oversight. It was a permanent shift in their environment, one that cannot be reversed, mitigated, or patched. They are haunted because their perception of control was shattered. They thought if they removed or diminished you, the void could be filled. But nothing and no one can replicate what you brought into existence simply by being aligned with your purpose. Their regret is deepened every day by the unchangeable truth. Replacement isn't possible, and the gap you left behind is a constant reminder of their misjudgment, their short-sightedness, and the irreversible consequence of underestimating you. Number 12, you outgrew them without ever competing. They assumed life was a game of conflict, rivalry, and constant proving, and they positioned themselves accordingly. They measured success by comparison, influence by dominance, and progress by who could outmaneuver whom. What they didn't account for was that you were playing a completely different game. You weren't competing with them, trying to prove your worth, or fighting for validation. You were evolving, expanding, and ascending quietly, steadily, and relentlessly, and that evolution didn't need anyone else to validate it. That's what makes their regret so intense. They realized too late that your growth doesn't operate by their rules. Every step they took to compete, control, or diminish you was irrelevant. Their strategies, insults, and manipulations had no impact because you weren't operating on the same plane. While they were busy trying to bend circumstances to their favor, you were aligning yourself with a larger path, a higher standard, and a deeper sense of self. Your progression wasn't about them, and that made it unstoppable. They can see the results now, the opportunities, the respect, the ease with which life bends in your favor. And they know that none of it could have been influenced by their actions. That realization is brutal because it exposes their entire approach as small, limited, and ineffective. The harsh truth for them is that being outgrown doesn't feel like defeat in the moment. It's subtle, it's quiet, and that's why it's so devastating. You didn't have to confront them, prove a point, or even acknowledge their attempts to control you. Your life moved forward, expanded, and thrived without their interference. The gap between who you are now and who they are stuck being widens every day, and they feel it in ways they can't escape. They are left watching from the sidelines, powerless, while life continues to elevate you naturally. And that is the sting of their regret. The realization that you outgrew them entirely without lifting a finger, without a fight, and without ever acknowledging the contest they thought existed. Your growth made their attempts irrelevant, and that truth is something they will carry for the rest of their lives. Number 13. Your protection confused them because it broke their belief system. They expected life to operate like it does for them, chaotic, punishing, and easily manipulated. They assumed that if someone crossed lines, acted independently, or refused to be controlled, consequences would follow. They planned, schemed, and pushed, fully confident that their actions would trigger setbacks, fear, or failure. What they didn't anticipate was that you were operating under a completely different framework. Your protection wasn't visible, loud, or dramatic, but it existed in a way that quietly defied their expectations. And that is what terrifies them now. They can't process it logically because it contradicts everything they believe about how the world works. In their minds, everyone is vulnerable, everyone can be cornered, and everyone is susceptible to chaos if pushed hard enough. But you proved otherwise. Threats didn't land. Attacks didn't stick. People who wanted to harm you stumbled, self-destructed, or simply couldn't touch you. That kind of reality doesn't fit into their worldview, and now they are forced to confront a truth they never prepared for. Some people operate on a level they will never reach. Their confusion isn't just about what happened. It's about why. Every strategy they employed failed not because they weren't smart or careful, but because they were up against alignment and protection that couldn't be measured, negotiated, or corrupted. They can see the results, your stability, your success, your calm in situations that would have destroyed others. But they can't reconcile how it happened. Their belief system, built on manipulation, fear, and control, collapses under the weight of your reality. And that collapse is where regret lives. They can look back at every insult, attack, and attempt to destabilize you and see their energy wasted. They can observe the doors that stayed open, the opportunities that unfolded, and the protection that always arrived before harm could touch you. They understand now that their worldview didn't apply to you, and that realization hurts more than failure ever could. You moved through life untouched in ways they never imagined, and that is a permanent reminder of their misjudgment, their limits, and the unshakable force that is you. Number 14. Their regret is sealed by the fact that access to you is permanently closed. This is the part that cuts the deepest. They can watch, observe, and even talk about you, but they will never reach you again. It's not because you're bitter, vengeful, or holding grudges. It's because your life has moved into a space where their influence, interference, or manipulation simply cannot penetrate. Every door they once thought they could open is closed. Every pathway they believed they could walk has been quietly barricaded by time, alignment, and the natural consequences of their misjudgment. And that finality is what makes their regret unbearable. They assumed proximity, familiarity, or manipulation could control your trajectory. They assumed that as long as they were involved, their opinions and actions mattered. They were wrong. You've moved beyond the environment where they held sway. You've shifted to a reality where your choices, your alignment, and your purpose dictate outcomes. Their attempts to reach you now are meaningless because you operate on a plane they will never touch. Every effort to reconnect, convince, or regain influence only reminds them of the permanent consequence of underestimating you. The harshest part is that they can't change it. They can see your progress, witness the respect you command, and hear about the doors that open for you, but none of it can be bridged by their presence. Any influence they thought they had is gone. The people, opportunities, and experiences they assumed would be manipulated are now entirely yours. Their regret isn't theoretical. It's daily, inescapable, and undeniable. They're reminded constantly that their misjudgment created a permanent barrier they cannot breach, and that barrier is silent, invisible, and absolute. You didn't have to shout, act out, or punish them to enforce it. You simply moved, aligned, and evolved in a way that made their access irrelevant. The truth is unforgiving. They can look all they want, speak all they want, and even try to insert themselves into your life in the smallest ways. But access to you is forever closed. That reality is the living proof of your worth, your protection, and the permanent consequences of their failure. Everything we've talked about today boils down to one undeniable truth. Your life, your purpose, and your alignment exist on a level that no one else can touch. The regret that others carry isn't about missing a person or a relationship. It's about the realization that they underestimated something far bigger than themselves. They misjudged your influence, your protection, your depth, and your ability to move through life untouched by the chaos they thrive on. Every attack, every attempt to control or diminish you, only highlighted your resilience, your clarity, and your unshakable power. The very things they tried to weaponize against you became proof of your extraordinary nature. They watched doors close, opportunities pass, and forces align in your favor, powerless to change anything. They realized too late that replacement wasn't possible, that alignment cannot be stolen, and that your growth operates outside the rules they thought governed life. They can apologize, strategize, or plead all they want, but the truth is permanent. Your protection, your path, and your evolution are untouchable. That is the ultimate sting of regret. Watching the life they tried to control thrive in ways they can never replicate or reach. This is a reminder for you. You don't need validation from those who doubted you, feared you, or tried to manipulate you. Your value isn't measured by their acknowledgement. It's proven every single day in the doors that open, the influence you carry, and the impact you make just by existing in alignment with your purpose. You are untouchable in ways they will spend a lifetime trying to understand. Their regret is the echo of their own misjudgment, and your life is living proof that destiny doesn't wait for permission, excuses, or approval. If this message resonated with you, if it gave you clarity, empowerment, or the reminder that your path is untouchable, then don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss insights that will elevate your life. Like this video to support content that speaks truth. Comment below to share your experiences and connect with others walking this path, and share it with anyone who needs to understand their own power and the consequences of underestimating someone destined for greatness. Your alignment is unstoppable, and the world deserves to see it. God bless you.